Well, this is going to be fun. Finally back again with David. David, you are one of the great optimists of the NFT industry. I was just talking with you about that, and I want everybody to know publicly that's my perspective is you bring enthusiasm, vision, and just a great view of what is and where we're going. In fact, that's what we are excited to have you share at NFT.NYC this year is the state of NFTs. And my expectation is that you'll bring a life-giving kind of view of what is with some critique and honesty about some of the concerns and where we're going. So for those that don't know who you are and maybe what you do at CoinFund as the managing partner, can you please introduce yourself?
Thank you for having me, Ian. The best part of the year is NFT.NYC because it is a conference celebrating a revolution in innovation in content creator economics and possibility, and it's filled with great energy. So I'm so excited to be back together in June in New York. I'm David Pakman. I'm a managing director at CoinFund, and my job there is to lead our venture investing activities. We have a seed fund that does really early stage investing. We have like a venture fund that does like Series A investing, and we have like a hedge fund that does like liquid crypto investing. But we are crypto native investing team. All we do is crypto and invest in a couple different stages, and I'm super psyched to talk about NFTs.
So you are one of the investors that has been in the industry really since people started calling digital assets and crypto collectibles NFTs at Venrock first and now at CoinFund. And I believe a lot of people think of you and your peers and your teams as the foundation that allowed them to kind of build and scale. Can you talk a bit about the entrepreneurs in Web3, kind of the state of entrepreneurship in Web3 and all things NFT land? And what you see maybe as different in this environment than what was traditional in your past investment life. Because I just heard Chris Dixon said maybe today or this week, 50% of all startups are Web3 startups. Not sure if it's true, but if that is even close to true, I would wonder, direct from you, what do you see different about entrepreneurs in this space?
Web3 broadly, entrepreneurs have a bit more purpose to them. It goes beyond just building a successful company. There's a lot of mission-driven entrepreneurs and developers building Web3 today. And I don't need to tell this to the people doing it because you know exactly why you're here. But particularly given the dramatic swings possible in valuations in crypto, you got to love it for more than just the chance that your token value goes up. And I think what draws so many of us to crypto and Web3 is a chance to build an ownership-based technology ecosystem where the people who build and use networks, protocols, web platforms can participate in the ownership of those. And why shouldn't it be that way? It's sort of sad that the internet wasn't that way. So that is both a technical and a cultural revolution, really. And so many people are focused on building this decentralized, permissionless innovation ecosystem built around open protocols that we can all have some ownership in. And actually, that's one of the reasons why NFTs are unique and interesting as part of Web3. And I'll just give you a minute of thought on this. Before the internet, digital creations or intellectual property of any kind, actually wasn't digital, it was almost all analog. And it was something that you could own. In fact, think about the words intellectual property. It's an ownership right in some piece of creativity, but that creativity manifested in a physical form. And so of course you could own a drawing or an LP, a CD, a book, right? A movie on a DVD or something else like that. There was some ownership built into a physical good. But then everything went digital with the internet. We invented this really frictionless way to distribute digital content. We turned music into bits. You remember the atoms to bits conversation, and everything became really seamless to fly around, but really hard to make scarce and very hard to protect from a duplication perspective. Everything's copyable. So if everything's copyable, it's really hard to make it scarce and make it owned. So what did we do in the internet? We invented a rental model for everything. And now you rent music, you rent movies, you rent books. They're disposable, they're digital, they're really hard to collect. And it's very hard to enforce any form of scarcity. And certainly there's no ownership. But I think that's just a blip. It's actually in the history of creativity, it's a small time period because NFTs re-enable the ownership of intellectual property, but they create a property right for digital creations. And so now we're going to have scarce music, scarce art, and scarce digital creations and provable ownership. And that kind of resets us back to where intellectual property was very comfortable with business models, but it enables way more revenue and profit for creators from a smaller number of people. So there's sort of a business model innovation or re-ovation, bringing us back to the way intellectual property was originally sold, which makes it uniquely exciting for creators of all types, the smallest ones in the long part of the tail, and the biggest ones at the biggest movie studios and record companies.
So, you really have a big view because of the portfolio companies that you've invested in, and in some cases potentially reinvested in. What is it that's most attractive to do follow-on investments? I'm assuming it's not just a metric. And a lot of entrepreneurs that either are raising or are looking toward their second or fifth raise, they should be mindful of your perspective of it's not just number of users and just revenue growth, and there's more to it. So what are some benchmarks that you look for when you say, okay, is this something that we're going to follow on for the second or fourth round as they're continue to raise to scale?
I think it's important that you're bringing it up in so much as we're in a bit of a market reset right now around the milestones that will lead to successful financings for companies. So thanks for raising it, Ian. I think we're going to move away right now from sentiment-based investing, where investors are making decisions on like, what is the developer sentiment around this protocol, or how well are they marketing at a developer conference? How are people feeling about this development team? Are they anons or not anons? And we're going to move instead to way more concrete, metric-oriented measurement of how companies or projects are succeeding. Now, it's different for all different types of projects. If it's a consumer DApp, you're going to look at the things that drove a lot of metrics of importance in the previous internet generations: number of users, unique users, time spent, wallet connects, retention, right? How long duration of usage is over time, and of course things like ARPU, like revenue per user, and so those metrics are going to rise. On developer-focused products, you're going to look at obviously developer adoption, but then the usage driven by those developers and the business model behind it. What is the way that developers are paying to utilize the network or the protocol, and what is the benefit of that payment? Is it does it go to 20% of the revenues go back into the token pool and burn tokens and it becomes deflationary? Like, these questions now become way more important in the market we're now in than sort of the loosey-goosey sentiment conversations.
It definitely felt like it was just a lot of wild enthusiasm. Everybody's making money, crypto's going up, NFT projects are selling out, the secondary market's healthy, and I think you and your peers and a lot of us on the NFT.NYC team, we've been around for several years. And so we've seen these ups and downs. We're maybe not rocked by it as some are, because of course it really impacts an individual. One of the things that we focused on for this year is diversity of projects, of blockchains, of communities, of approaches. And it's been fun for me to do these interviews and talk with people doing really unique things in hospitality or in music or, the supply chain management, like all these different use cases around NFTs and how they can be used. What are some diverse projects that have been kind of standing out to you? Maybe not project by name, but types of projects. And what maybe are you looking toward? Is there certain types of diverse use cases that if you and the CoinFund team see, you go, we've been waiting for that. Like, this has been a long time coming. I thought that would be already in place. This is the type of group that we should talk with and look at how we might be able to support them.
2 or 3 main areas right now feel like the stuff we've been waiting for, or expecting maybe is a better word, and now we're seeing a lot of it. The first is NFT financialization. I think I actually talked about it maybe last year, expecting that this would be the next phase, or I might have called it NFT DeFi. But when you have collectors amassing large and somewhat or very valuable NFT collections, it's somewhat only natural that you may want to pool those together for purchasing power, or you may want to loan against them, or you may even want like instant liquidity. So you don't want to wait for a long-term auction to run its course. And to pull that off, you need pricing estimators. What's an NFT worth, especially if it's not all that liquid? What I mean is, by definition, it's unique, it's non-fungible, and therefore it's maybe a little bit hard to comp against other recent sales. So how do you know what it's worth? So we've seen a bunch of different protocols try to solve NFT pricing, oracles, and we've seen a bunch of financialization protocols or applications to help people monetize or borrow against, or otherwise maybe even fractionalize or pool together NFTs. So that's happening now. There's not massive amount of adoption yet. There's evidence of it. Some of these products are in market, and there are people, borrowing against their punks. But it certainly hasn't tipped into the mass market yet. So that's definitely one section. Another area that we've seen a lot more activity is, believe it or not, sort of on the social front. Can you build decentralized components of social products? Think about messaging, social attributes like followers and following, and creating feed-based relationships on chain. That's now coming together. One relatively obvious place for this is on marketplaces, so that a prospective buyer can message with the seller, right? It's really hard to do that on a decentralized marketplace today. So how do you create decentralized messaging layers to go between wallets or users? So I put that all in the social bucket, but there's a lot more of that going on, and it's geared towards consumers, which means it intersects with NFTs.
So NFT, DeFi, social, all things in the social world. What are your thoughts on infrastructure companies? So if a team, because there's so much energy around the creators, the artists, the communities, the projects, as it should be, wonderful. But there's more and more talking and working in teams around infrastructure, metaverse infrastructure, platform infrastructure, smart contract infrastructure built for just musicians or just digital artists. So what are your thoughts on infrastructure? And as people that are at NFT.NYC or part of the community, as they think through projects that they should either be a part of or potentially invest into, how much should infrastructure be ringing a green bell? Like, hey, pay attention. This is actually going to be useful in the next year and next decade. It's not just more of a momentary project. So talk to us a bit about the infrastructure focus.
One fun thing to do is to go on the AWS status page at Amazon and just scroll for the 5 or 10 minutes it takes you to scroll through all the different services that Amazon has built as part of AWS. I mean, it's like 5 minutes of scrolling. There's so much software. Like, if you think of the modern web stack, it's incredible how rich and built out that infrastructure is. Infrastructure is not just renting a server to run your web app, right? There's so much software built. Now compare that to how much of the Web3 infrastructure have we built? Well, we've built a couple layer 1 protocols, a couple storage protocols, and then I can point to a couple other little things. We've got a long way to go in that stack. Now, it's not going to be the same stack, but just think about all the stuff that's missing in Web3 that Web2 developers are used to having. Data pipelines, personalization, machine learning, video transcoding, communication between users, the social features, all the stuff we're talking about. So the answer to your question, I think, is we have many years of infrastructure to build, not just specific to NFTs, just Web3 in general. And so by definition, I think probably 60% of all the startups we see fall into the infrastructure camp. Okay. And it may be protocols, but it may also be some of the tools that you talked about. NFT minting and issuance, management of DAOs, right? And the DAO tooling, community management, even trading infrastructure, business reporting, auditing. There's so much that's still being built, developer tools. So I think we got many years of that to build out. Again, we don't have to duplicate Web2, but there is a number of components above the base compute and storage layers that are missing. And there's a bunch specific to NFTs, as you mentioned. So yeah, we got a lot more building to do. What's kind of cool, though, is how rich some of the consumer experiences around NFTs are already able to be, even without a lot of it. Our portfolio company, Dapper Labs, has done a really great job building around NBA Top Shot and NFL All Day, and a couple other products built around sports collectibles. But many of those are hybrid applications. They're built on blockchains, but they still have to use kind of some Web 2 componentry to deliver the user experience that mainstream consumers expect. And none of us want that. We want to build on top of truly decentralized architecture, but I think it's just going to take us time to build all that out.
So when it comes to tools, how fragmented do you think the most successful companies will be? So let me say for music. Do you think that the most successful tool for musicians will be the all-in-one tool? Or do you imagine that there'll be a dominant tool for each industry? There'll be a dominant country music tool, and a dominant hip hop music tool, and a dominant instrumental music tool. The reason I ask is because things are different in a decentralized approach, and potentially there'll be a greater appetite for more decentralized, more specific. So that's a thought. I'd love to get your input on that.
The bigger question I think you're touching on and asking when you're talking to a venture capitalist is not just like which tools will be built, but where will the value accrue? So if we think about Web 2, there are lots of tools to let you upload your music to Spotify and then like manage your account statement.
Right.
And not a lot of value has accrued in that layer. It's almost a commodity. Easily 20 companies can help you, manage your band's assets digitally and get them distributed. Yep. Where did all the value accrue in Web 2 for music? Two places: content ownership at the aggregated level, that's record companies, which is where it was already, and distribution, or what some people call consumer aggregation, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon. Yep. Everything in the middle, not a lot of value. It doesn't mean they're not useful. Good utilities, you need them. Think about even the composition or recording software layer, right? Digital audio workstations, DJ software, sample management, recording, all that stuff. Relatively small businesses, not a lot of economic value built there. So the tools are important, but it's not necessarily where all the value gets created. The question you're really asking is in Web3, where will the value be created? Where will the big stuff be created? Now that's unproven today. The answer is not known yet. A lot of speculation. But one of the arguments I'm making is that because of NFTs, which allow a smaller number of people to pay a higher price for ownership of creativity than compared to what we all pay to stream music.
Yeah.
That price skimming strategy for a creator, where my bigger fans can pay more to buy stuff that's unique and scarce, is an underappreciated business model innovation or a return to what we could do in the physical world that I think will prove that content today, particularly content that's in demand, is undervalued relative to that future. Most content libraries, music, movies, books, are kind of presupposed that their long-term economics are from a streaming rental era. But NFTs, I think, are going to unlock incremental revenue. It doesn't hurt the content owners. It will help them. And in some ways, I think that these content owners are probably, particularly the larger ones, are probably undervalued. If you're talking about Star Trek, the Star Trek IP universe is probably undervalued today relative to its promise of issuing digital collectibles around NFTs and ownership. And that might be true for the real long tail as well.
So that's good. I'm glad I asked that question, because sometimes it's the VC perspective on value creation, long-term value that the platform brings is lost amongst the branding, right? Like, well, who do they want to go and work with? So let me ask this on infrastructure from your perspective on storage. Google at their I/O conference just said Google Cloud is the cloud of Web3. So there's one category. There's the people that are hosting content on traditional Web 2 cloud infrastructure, GCS, Azure, and AWS. Then the more decentralized infrastructure, but still potentially with some concerns, the IPFS of the world. Then there's some projects like Cyberbroker spent almost 100 ETH to put their 10,000 PFPs on the actual Ethereum blockchain as SVG files. So here's 3 different ways that storage is being done and talked about today, although most people won't talk about it if they're using AWS. What is your perspective on where things stand with storage, and what would you like to see develop over the maturity of our industry in terms of maybe 1 or 2 really good options for people to think through strategically when they're deciding how to store the content that others are outright buying either full or partial ownership of?
For non-on-chain data, because we know where on-chain data gets stored, for non-on-chain data, stuff that accompanies on-chain experiences, we have something really nice in IPFS and some of the other implementations of that. We have a decentralized way to store that so that there's like not a known set of servers that we could cut the power off and it goes away, right? It's decentralized storage. What we don't have are rich metadata layers that help decentralized dApps catalog and point to that content. Now, we have an investment in a company called Ceramic. I think the company's called 3Box, but the protocol is called Ceramic, that really lets you build. It's like a database for building databases. It is a sovereign data metadata layer that lets you have a canonical representation for where off-chain data gets stored decentrally. And so I think there are going to be ways to solve this. One question you're asking about is like, well, where do the hard drives live? And this is the one that may be unsatisfying argument about where if everything in the stack is decentralized, we've got layer 1s, maybe some layer 0 substrate, maybe we've got layer 2 acceleration and scaling layers. Maybe we have things like Ceramic, but we have like video transcoding, like LivePeer. Maybe we have a decentralized machine learning layer, like all this stuff in the stack. They're all going to run on a bunch of nodes because they're like blockchains, right? Okay, where are those nodes going to sit? Are they in my basement or are they in AWS? So I feel confident that the data centers that the giant cloud providers have built out are likely where a lot of the nodes will live, but who controls them and can turn them off is what's different now. Right, when I use AWS as my hosting provider, I'm also using a bunch of their software in the stack that they control, and they can decide to kick me off the platform. But I think it'll be harder for them to kick. They can shut off a bunch of computers. They have no idea what's running on them, and if they're all hosting decentralized, Web3 infrastructure, I think we're protected against the single point of failure challenge and the decisions that a platform provider can make. But so I think the future for storage and for the other protocols above it, I think are running on lots of different nodes spread around the world, but they may be in data centers, run by Amazon, Google, Microsoft, and a couple others.
Well, time will tell. I want to be thoughtful of time. If people want to look into Ceramic, as you mentioned, they can go to 3boxlabs.com. That's 3 as the number, 3boxlabs.com. Before I let you get back to your full schedule, as I imagine you have just about every day, let me ask you this. What would be your summary of the state of NFTs? You're going to come and deliver a real in-depth talk, but if somebody just said, hey, what's your 50,000 foot view, the state of NFTs today, maybe we could kind of end our conversation with you sharing that with us.
I would say, first of all, it's early. Like we did $25 billion in sales of NFTs last year. It was sort of like the first year of commercialization. That's an unbelievably mammothly large number, right? Just crazy. We did $10 billion of NFT sales in Q1 of this year. That's during the market correction. I know the numbers are down, but still massive, massive dollars from a relatively small number of people. Yeah. It's like 5 or 6 million people buying NFTs right now. Mm-hmm. But there's really interesting data about those people. The people who buy one NFT tend to buy more than one. The ARPU spent, the revenue spent per user, very high relative to games or music or other forms of media. Why is that? Because they own it. They own it in perpetuity. It has a second life. It can be resold. It can have utility. But it's so early that I have mentioned before that most of the NFTs we're all buying today are static. They don't really change much. But these are software that can evolve. They can get smarter or rarer or add new attributes based on who the owner is. They can even personalize over time. So it's early. The promise is really large. And I think for all content owners alike, from the biggest to the smallest, they offer us a path to a profitable and sustainable business model as creators that did not exist in Web 2 because we focused on the rental model. So continue to build no matter where we are in the price cycle or in the hype cycle. But we already have enough evidence that consumers care, and they care enough to spend a lot of money in this category. So let's build really great products that people want to buy.
Well, I'm glad I asked you to share that. I find what you said to resonate with me. I think a lot of people resonate with your perspective, and it's also just encouraging. It can't be said enough. The impact that you've had on this industry is felt. There's so many triggers where if Venrock and CoinFund didn't jump in and add a new company to their portfolio and provide the resources needed to scale, then how many other organizations and projects would have been affected by that? So I hope that you feel incredibly proud, you and your team, of all that you've helped others accomplish in partnership with you. And I look forward to spending more time with you in New York.